I'm creating this tutorial because I could not find a tutorial on how to set gemstones on top of resin. I'm usually pretty good at searching for things like that, but I couldn't find anything, so here we go. I was given a wooden butterfly pendant several years ago by a dear friend, and I thought that it would make a nice mold and a nice necklace pendant. And the only thing that could really accent it and make it look even prettier were gemstones. I made my mold, but my first attempt at making a gemstone butterfly pendant didn't work out so good because I didn't realize that resin actually flattens the gemstones. You lose all of that beautiful detail when you embed the gemstones in the resin. And I had even tested a pendant with some fake rhinestone gemstones, and I thought because they were already kind of flat to begin with, maybe that's why they didn't look right, but no. They're still pretty. I still think it's pretty, but it's not as pretty as it will be with the gemstone sitting on top. As you can see, I've made some, and they're really pretty. So I start by pouring my mold, and then I cut a little slit with an X-Acto knife right in that top edge wing, and I set the jump ring in it in such a way that the opening on the jump ring is actually embedded in the resin to make it sturdier. Then I mix my resin, but I only fill it about 3/4 of the way because I'm going to let this resin set for about 3 hours, and then I'm going to set my center gemstone in it. So after 3 hours, the resin has gelled enough that I'm going to use what's called a third hand helper. Mine comes with a magnifying glass and alligator clamps. And what it allows me to do is very meticulously place the gemstone exactly where I want it above the resin and hold it there, so that when the resin fully cures, the gemstone is set in it and isn't going anywhere. I can't just set the gemstone in it while it's still thin, or it'll fall over and it's not as easy to manipulate. So after 3 hours, I'm going to use the third hand helper and I'm going to set it exactly where I want it, and then check it regularly, because depending on how long it takes your resin to cure, the resin's tendency is to climb up the sides. So I don't want it on the clamp. I want it just literally right on the bottom of the gemstone. I mix a new batch of resin and then I let it set for 30 minutes, long enough for it to gel so that I can dome the pendant. I take a toothpick and I go very slowly around the edges, making sure that the edges are filled in, and then slowly around the gemstone, being careful not to drip resin on top of it or across it. It's a bit of a slow process, but it's worth it. I let this resin set for about 4 hours. after about 4 hours, you can take your gemstones and tweezers and you can carefully set them exactly where you want them, making sure not to get the tweezers in the resin. But once you can feel it setting in the resin, then you can take your finger and just push it down. And then I tend to check it for the next 2 or 3 hours after doing that to make sure it's not moving around. The resin's pretty thick at this point, but if you're not using super small gemstones, they have a little bit of a thickness to them from top to bottom. They can move around a little bit, so just make sure that you keep coming back and checking on it to make sure they're in the position you want them to be in. After 24 hours, which is about how long it takes for my resin to cure, I look it over and take a file, just like a fingernail file, and I wet it and I sand whatever edges need to be sanded down. And I'll sand the front flat side of the pendant if I have to and get it nice and glossy, just in case some of the resin spills a little bit. Every once in a while it'll spill down the edge and make it sticky. It'll stick to the cotton pad that I'm using. I'll have to sand that flat edge down really good and make it nice and clear again. There's several ways to do that, but the best process is to take wet sandpaper and start with a lower grit and then move your way up into the 1500 grit range, 2000 even. And if you don't have the patience for that, you can use a clear coat of acrylic spray over it, but don't use it on the gemstone side. Probably leave that out. When you're done, you should have a really gorgeous pendant, and you can have a lot of fun with it. For Mother's Day, I have made the women in my family birthstone pendants. So the center pendant, the heart area, is their birthstone, and then their family is fanned out around them.